It's been an incredible couple of days. We've heard very candid and open conversations and honesty from all the delegates, and we plan to continue in the spirit of that trend. Our session today is the future of foreign direct investment in a post-COVID era. Ladies and gentlemen, let's be honest, the post-COVID era isn't exactly what we anticipated it to be. We were hoping for a robust path to economic recovery. We were banking on a fragile recovery, but yet one where we all walked in unison and lockstep with each other. That has now fundamentally changed with regards to the new risks that are on the horizon, the uncertainties that have emerged because of the crisis in Eastern Europe, and what that's going to mean for the appetite to invest, for appetite to look at other urgent matters, for the appetite to still look at funding projects, industrialization of some of the poorer countries, of looking at exciting projects to try and increase human capabilities. When we think about the risks that now the world is facing, we're talking about, again, food insecurity. We're worried about inflation. We still have the urgency of the climate change agenda while still pushing ahead on the new digital era that is going to help elevate the world. So we have incredible guests that are going to join me today to discuss some of the priorities when it comes to FDI, where we are with FDI and if things have fundamentally changed over the past month, and how we can ensure economic development in this new environment. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call on Sheikh Ali Alawid Al Thani, the CEO of Investment Promotion Agency, Qatar. Round of applause, please. Lovely to see you, sir. Ahmed Burak Daliolu, President, Investment Bank Officer of the Republic of Turkey. Lana Khalaf, General Manager at Microsoft Qatar. And Santiago Bañales, the Managing Director of Iberdrola Innovation Middle East. Welcome to all of you. Thank you so much for joining me today. Because our lives have changed fundamentally over the past month, I think that we came with an intention at this year's Doha Forum with the hope that we could be talking about a new future after creating so much resilience and agility within businesses and governments, and understanding how important multilateralism is, understanding how important investing within each other's countries is, but now it feels a little different to what we were hoping. So Sheikh, I'd like to start with you. If you could give me an idea of how you're viewing the current situation and how that's impacted your day-to-day doings and dealings.
Thank you, and I think it's a great opener to this panel. If you look at the trends, right, and you look at, for example, how FDI fared during the pandemic, and UNCTAD expected a drop of around 40% in global FDI flows. It ended up dropping something around 37%, close to that. I think developing markets fared better than developed markets, especially with standing COVID and kind of adapting to the new circumstances. Now, I mean, if you look at the 2021 numbers, which is the latest, we surpassed the kind of pre-COVID level in terms of global FDI flows. So there is a strong rebound, right? When you look at Qatar specifically, I mean, there's a number of tailwinds that I think would be very beneficial from an FDI perspective. You have the current commodity supercycle, Qatar's own economic diversification efforts, and also the 2022 World Cup at the end of this year. So very optimistic, I mean, especially with Qatar. Obviously, I think the new kind of geopolitical situation presents its own set of challenges. And however, I think we are well positioned going forward in the post-COVID area.
So you haven't seen any sort of drop-off of conversations with regards to FDI or appetite for investors to still enter Qatar?
No, and I think the numbers speak for themselves. I mean, if you look at Qatar's FDI inflows specifically, and also especially the performance of inflows in the non-hydrocarbon sectors, which has continually kind of exceeded the inflows in the hydrocarbon space. and as well as Qatar's kind of positioning. You look at companies looking to vertically integrate down to the materials level. We're looking at companies that are looking to hedge their presence away from other regions that, due to geopolitical concerns. Think, Qatar, and I'm glad to be joined as well by my
Come to Qatar, we invite you all.
Yeah.
Is that the message?
No, I think it's, we sit in a good position.
Okay.
And with a number of, I think secular trends that I think emerged during COVID, such as digitization and especially supply chain resiliency in Qatar, I think that would help carry us forward.
Thank you for that. Burak, great to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell me where Turkey stands with all of these new realities. And I know, as we've ascertained, even over the last day and a half, that you're taking a very diplomatic approach despite being in NATO. How does that then influence the FDI flows?
First of all, I would like to start with the recent trends, in the post-COVID era. Actually, what we see, those trends did not start with the COVID. I mean, there were some trends before the COVID. COVID was like a catalyst or a facilitator of those processes to be, being faster. So what are these changes? For example, companies are now working with asset-light strategies. So the volume of those FDI projects are not as large as the previous types. Or another major trend, especially affecting emerging markets. Previously, the rate of return on FDI projects were higher in emerging markets compared to the developed economies. Now this spread is, much more smaller. So this is another crucial threat to the FDI projects in the emerging markets. Or another risk is these protectionist investment or trade policies globally. Or we were talking about geopolitics risks in other countries, in other regions, and now we have a major threat in the north of Turkey. I mean, Russian attack on the Ukraine created it. Yeah. So maybe most important changes were around the sustainability and digitalization. And actually, financing of technology startups became a very important driver of the FDI inflows to many countries, especially emerging markets. So when we look at the Turkey's position, of course, all the companies are looking for resilience in their supply chains, and what we have proven in the last 2 years, Turkey is a resilient partner of the especially multinationals in our region, because we never stopped supply chain in our country during the pandemic. We had a very good crisis management in this regards, and of course, recently we are having this challenge of how to manage the crisis in Ukraine and Russia. So, of course, these will have many impacts on our geography in European market in terms of supplying raw materials, some intermediary goods, in terms of supplying energy, and this creates an inflationary risk, further inflationary risk in the post-COVID era. So countries are adapting to the new reality, and we believe that if we would like to attract FDI projects, we have to understand the mentality of the investors, their priorities. Since they are looking for resiliency, countries must develop policies which are enablers of resilient supply chains, which are enablers of agile business environment in those countries.
Thank you so much.
This is enough for the first round.
Yeah, Lana.
So first, as you said, we need to deal with uncertainty in the future, and this is the future, it's uncertain. Whether this is what actually COVID or post-COVID looks like, uncertain. And two, definitely we have seen like literally 2 years of digital transformation just happen in 2 months during COVID. And if there is one of the key things on future investment that we see accelerating every country recovery, every organization to be competitive for the future, and every economic recovery is digital and technology investments. We have actually worked with many countries to respond, recover, and literally reimagine the future of the economy through technology. In Qatar, specifically, as you said, on investment, actually Microsoft is co-investing with Qatar, with the state of Qatar, on bringing a global data center to Qatar. This didn't also, we have seen the impact hands-on. We have seen around $3.14 billion going into the economy over the next 5 years in Qatar as a result of this investment in digital technologies. Because today every industry is utilizing digital, like how factories are being becoming automated, how virtual meetings are happening, how e-commerce, retail, and many industries are really adopting the technology to adapt to the future of generations to come, and of course post-COVID. More so, the impact on the economy is not only investment direct, there is also literally a big impact on people. Because if you look today on every single research out there, it says that the top 10 jobs in the future are technology. And if we really want to invest in any country, it's two things, the investments in how can we recover economy, but also people, which is key. And if the future jobs are around, top jobs of the future are technology, and this is where we're bringing, where we will see around 24,000 new jobs in Qatar, of digital jobs in Qatar over the next 5 years. So definitely digital investment is something we see. Digital transformation is key for the future and is at the forefront of recovery of economies.
Thank you. Santiago, how are you viewing the world with this new lens of ours?
Yes, well, first of all, just to put my answer into context, so I represent one of the largest power utilities in the world, private utilities. So we make very large investments in renewables, in grids around the world. So if there is one sector that is getting affected, impacted by all the things we are seeing, is the energy sector, right? Yeah. So we see the impact in two different layers, or two different terms. In the short term, what is clear is that all the investments are going towards diversification of supply for the hydrocarbon, oil and gas fuels. That's the first thing. So, like for example, in Europe, we have 40% of our gas that comes from Russia. It's not the case of Spain. In Spain, we get it from Qatar or from the United States, but in Central Europe, it's mainly from Russia. So there is a big investment on diversification of the oil and gas supply. And also, what we see is an increase in coal, for example, so fossil fuel in generation. But that's the short term. In the long term, we believe that this crisis is going to catalyze, even accelerate, the transformation of the energy sector that we have been promoting in the last 20 years. And this means three things. First of all, it's an electrification of the economy. So there are two big sectors, so transportation and heating, that are going to be transformed from a technology perspective and will go from fossil fuels to electricity. Second thing is that, of course, this extra electricity that we'll need needs to come from renewables, from clean energy, right? So we see, like, more or less will be around 4 trillion investment per year in clean energy going forward. And then the other thing is that we also see a transformation towards digitalization. So we see both, here I go with my colleague Elana, we'll see that we will invest in these clean energies, electrification of the demand, but also digitalization to be able to bring together all these factors. And I'm happy to announce that even though we have all these changes in the background, Iberdrola, so my company, we have not changed our investment plan. So we are investing up to 75 billion euros, mostly in renewables and networks. It's 50% renewables, 40%
You say
networks.
you haven't changed
We have not changed our investment plan.
You haven't increased it at all either yet.
We have not increased it either, but we haven't changed it. As a matter of fact, we had to present in London 2 weeks ago the new investment plan, and we decided to postpone this presentation. And for now, what we say to the investors is that we keep our plan, which is covering 2020 from 2025. And I said it's 75 billion euros investment, mainly in the Atlantic region. And,
if they say we need more and we need to do it faster, will you be able to execute that?
Yes, we will. But of course, you need two things. You need to have a regulation and a commitment from governments to go ahead with this kind of developments, right? And the other thing is financing, right? You need to get the right financing to do it. But from a capabilities point of view and from a strategic point of view, we for sure will increase this investment if needed.
And you're ready. Okay, really interesting opening statements. And it just goes to show that we need to look beyond the initial impact of this, of increased food prices and a supply shock in terms of oil supply, in terms of what the International Energy Agency says. Sheikh, I'd like to come to you because you mentioned something interesting about, businesses that are left out in the cold right now can invest and do business in Qatar or look at diversifying. I want you to sort of tell me about the mechanics of what that would look like and whether you've had, phone calls, interest right now in opening up something in Qatar, and give me a sense of what that looks like.
Yeah, and it's a good place to go. When you look at the current emerging trends, high energy prices in Europe and Asia as well. This really shifts Qatar's own competitive advantages, right? And we see companies that are seeking to re-diversify their presence in a way that could, create some kind of supply chain resiliency. And supply chain resiliency, in addition to digitization, are the kind of secular trends that first emerged, I think, during COVID, but now kind of accelerated with the current geopolitical situation. Now, where Qatar sits, I think we really, we invested quite a lot, especially around, the concept of resiliency, on food security, on creating, our own supply chain that would be resilient to external shocks. That in itself has become a value proposition. And in the end, I mean, when you're speaking to investors, I mean, they're thinking of people and infrastructure, from healthcare to education, connectivity. And now I think Qatar's value proposition really kind of enhanced due to the investment I think we've made, during previous rounds of external shocks that we've managed to sustain. And now I think that really, borne fruit during this crisis. And I think investors see that, and that is kind of the basis of increased.
Let me put it simply, and I'm going to be honest, because in the spirit of honesty here, at the Doha Forum, are you getting phone calls and knocks on the door from Russian businesses and Ukrainian businesses right now?
Yeah. So I think, look, I mean, there is reports of kind of an exodus of certain businesses in Russia, especially ones that are kind of impacted by the current, situation, right? And, these, obviously, some of them are in, sectors that really have nothing to do. I mean, from agri-tech, some IT companies, etc., that are just looking to sustain, their business somewhere.
And they're caught in the middle, right?
We've seen some, relocate in their entirety. So that is some of the kind of trends that have emerged. And, the GCC has been one of these destinations, other countries as well, and we see that emerging, both not just Russia and Ukraine, but also Belarus and Eastern Europe as well.
Absolutely. Barak, we had His Excellency the Foreign Minister of Turkey also alluding to this, that anyone that wants to do honest business in Turkey would be welcome, and that would include Russian oligarchs, for example. How does that translate into what you will be doing and what you've seen on the ground?
So let's start with these short-term discussions. We already had several relocation projects, and in our pipeline we have double-digit numbers of projects, relocation projects from Ukraine and Russia. Those are mainly multinationals of European countries or United States. I think there is definitely such a trend, but companies would like to keep their names confidential, so I cannot share details. But I think when we look at the overall approach of overall positioning of Turkey, I mean, for example, in 2020, you said that the global FDI dropped by 40%, but this was limited to 15% in Turkey. And last year we had I mean, 80% of rebound, increasing FDI. So we believe that Turkey's position is quite solid. I mean, our key value proposition is it's a resilient and fast-growing economy. It offers a business-friendly and reformist investment climate. And it offers a deep and competent talent pool. It's 85 million population. We are adding, almost 1 million population to our, every year to our population. And lastly, it offers a global market access at the nexus of Europe, Asia, and Africa. So this set of value proposition is quite, I think, interesting for the investors, international.
So I'm curious because, perception is everything, right? Trust is everything when it comes to FDI. So when we're looking at this polarization that's occurring where you have, big part of, the global West making it very clear that we don't want to do business with Russia through sanctions, right? And then you have global South and East choosing to abstain and some choosing to be a lot more vocal. If you're going to be doing business with Russians, and let's call it what it is, are you concerned in any way that that's going to taint perceptions towards Turkey and even Qatar for other FDI flows from other countries? Or is that not a concern for you, Burak?
It's not a concern because
Is it a probability that-
position of Turkey is very clear. We are a NATO
Yeah.
member country. We are ally of US and European countries in the region. This is important. We are in the region.
Yes.
And of course, since we have certain relations with Russia, we have to be in a balanced position. So the perception is not negative. Frankly speaking, I was in US 2 weeks ago for an economic diplomacy mission, and all the feedback from the state offices and business NGOs, US Chamber of Commerce, and think tanks was really positive. They are committing higher business volume with Turkey.
How do you draw a line between doing business with business people that wouldn't be benefiting Putin? Or is that something you guys are not thinking about?
This is for sure. I mean, we are not targeting, we are not chasing, we are not pursuing any
Yeah.
that, let's say, any investment or capital, having a question mark on that. As I said, our project pipeline is full of MNCs of Western countries.
Thank you. Does anyone else want to comment on this? Sheikh, do you want to?
Yeah, I just want to mention also, it's not necessarily as well that it's Russian businesses or any Russian businesses associated with the state to a certain degree. Some of the flows, what we're seeing is foreign businesses that are based in Russia, which are pulling out and are looking to redirect.
So a new home, right?
So, from different types of businesses, but mostly foreign companies that are based in Russia that are looking to relocate, and that could lead to, some of them are brownfield growth, so they have already presence in Qatar, but they're expanding or relocating people here. But I don't really think that, essentially, especially in certain sectors, I mean, such as agriculture, etc., that, that would be construed to be kind of any stance of support in this kind of geopolitical situation.
Okay, fascinating. Lana, I want you to jump in here. You spoke about something that I think has benefited so many of us during the pandemic, right? Digitalization, a huge acceleration in digital adoption. The businesses that were not digitally first fell behind. They caught them, they were basically caught with their pants down. Where would you say we are right now? Because the GCC countries have been very vocal about digitalization for quite some time, and perhaps better suited to plug into this new, digital economy than most other countries around the world. What trends are exciting you at this point?
Definitely, the GCC, especially Qatar, I would say a lot about Qatar, is that they were ready with the infrastructure, which is key. They're ready with the infrastructure. They were ready with certain things, digital first. Of course, what's now going forward or more exciting to see is how can they use this power of all this digital adoption, how can they translate it into very smart decision making, where to invest, who to attract, what to do, how to react, how to decide in businesses or as a country or as an organization or as a company. And this is where we see what's more important coming in the future other than, of course, we have adopted digital first. I think the policies and regulations are following the digital adoption as we speak in the country, where digital policies or regulation are being today worked on. But then after that is how can you utilize all the power of all this data that has been generated as an impact of all the adoption of all of this digital, if you want, software or applications. And also everything shifted digital from learning to living to working. So how can you get all this data and utilize artificial intelligence, data analytics, and much more to really make sense of all this data for the country to reimagine and really utilize it to grow further and more.
So what happens when, we know what happened with the pandemic, which created an acceleration, right, in terms of digital adoption. So what happens when you see immense risk aversion, which have profound social impacts? For example, countries having food insecurity. How does that derail or strengthen digital adoption?
Sure. Look, we think digital adoption can support these scenarios. How do we think we do that? Because digital can, if you want, can support the supply chain, can help countries in actually from social media. You can actually require data, social media analytics can actually support these countries. We can, just make sure you utilize technology in order to automate supply chain, in order to support. Does it impact, how can digital really impact immediately such situations? Definitely not direct, but we see indirect impact for sure. And we have seen this where countries who were able to use a digital native supporting other countries. I just want to share one thing. We think today, post-COVID, we don't live in a solo. We live in partnership models. And this is what will help such scenarios and such difficult scenarios, if you want. Because even technology on its own or digital technologies can no longer be solo. For example, you said, what if here infrastructure is high cost? What if somebody, you don't have something specific they don't have, or they have high inflation, or they have insecurity? How can you help? Is by all partnering together into this. Private, government, education, all together, and countries supporting others. And this is how we will unlock these things.
Okay, interesting. We want, and that's the point, that countries need to work with each other. I'm hoping that's going to happen and we don't see huge divisions. Conversation for another day. Santiago, I want you to jump in here for me. It's really encouraging to hear that we're going to hopefully see, based on your prognosis, a huge acceleration towards the move to renewables. And I have to say, I was watching some of the panels in yesterday's session, and the one that really struck me is we're sitting with an energy security problem because we have been discouraging investment in oil and gas, which means that we're sitting with supply constraints because we didn't think about possible, huge supply shocks. And that renewables are going to take some time. And we still need transitional models, like, for instance, focusing on gas. How does that play into what you're thinking before you go to London and do your roadshow and give some solutions to some of the energy problems that your company can help solve?
Yes, I mean, it's very clear that normally what we say is that we have a threefold dilemma with energy, right? So on one hand, we need to decarbonize, that's very clear. But also we need to do it at a competitive cost, okay? And also we need to do it in a way that we can't afford from economic point of view, right? And also from a supply side. I mean, having diversification so you have security in the supply of energy. So security, decarbonization, and competitive supply are three things that are difficult to reach. And right now we have a very tricky situation because, as I said, we need to invest in the short term in the diversification of supply, which means that we need to invest, capital investment into hydrocarbons, right? But at the same time, we need to accelerate towards the renewable investment in the medium term. So it's a very, very tricky situation. What we think is that we cannot lose this opportunity to accelerate towards this investment in renewables. So let's not lose sight of this horizon, and let's make sure that we achieve this. I think from COVID, we learned something very important. A couple of things. One thing is that we can make great changes, okay, when we need to do it, okay? We made great changes, but that's one thing. But the other thing is that these changes do not stay over time if we are not consistent. In the energy sector, what happened is because of the COVID, emissions globally decreased drastically, right? But then we have recovery, and then the emissions went up to the sky, in a matter of months, right? And we are again in the same situation. So that's the two important things. We can do anything. We are able to do anything. We need to be consistent over time.
Yeah, we do, and it's so fascinating you say that because I was listening to the Total CEO, and he was saying, if we're going to solve this energy crisis, we need commitment from governments that you guys are going to buy our gas for the next 20 years, because that's the life cycle. You're saying we need to be consistent. Where's the balance in that conversation, right, between, energy security, price, and decarbonization?
Okay, I'm going to take the corporate answer if you want.
Please do.
No, right now, what happens is that renewables, okay, can bring the three things at the same time. It's clear you go on to decarbonize, renewables, that's clear. But also it's the most competitive technology right now in most of the places. Okay? We have seen an 80% reduction in the last decade of the cost of solar and wind energy. So it is competitive, right? And in terms of security of supply, of course, you produce locally, you generate local jobs, so also you get security. Not everything is perfect, because, for example, in order to do renewables, you need minerals and you need metals. So you come to a different problem, which is, where do you source these metals and these minerals that you need in order to make this transition? So it's not that there is a magic solution to that. But again, and sorry to repeat myself, but the solution is to invest more on renewables. That's we can achieve the three things.
Absolutely, and this is the point, right? We have so many crises globally that we're looking at, so we need to think about food security. We need to think about the climate. We need to think about how emerging markets, low-income countries are going to industrialize, but do it in a sustainable way. We need to alleviate poverty. The Sustainable Development Goals have not just disappeared because there's a war and because there's a crisis in Eastern Europe. So my question to you, and by the way, we'll be going to the audience for questions in about 7 minutes, so please jot down your thoughts, and we'll be posing that to the panelists. Has your priority list, Sheikh, changed since a month ago in terms of where you'd like FDI flows to go and how you would be marketing those to the businesses that are knocking on your door, and what would that sector list look like for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think, in terms of strategy and priorities, it's always changing, right? Due to, first, what suits Qatar's competitive advantages and what would, help us create, Qatar's future economy, right? I think this is the question. What sectors, clusters do you want to develop that would, help first create the jobs that would, suit Qatar in the future, and as well as help Qatar diversify more away from hydrocarbons. And here there's a number. Obviously, ICT and technology is really important. Microsoft, if you look at Microsoft example, I'll just pick on Lana. Microsoft doubled Qatar's ICT contribution to our GDP. Just this one
and what percentage is
FDI project. And now it's at around 5%, I think. So we see the benefits of FDI, right? And there is a benefit in terms of creating high-skilled jobs, in terms of diversification of the economy, especially in the non-hydrocarbon sector. And this is where we've always been focusing. However, the shift in focus within the non-hydrocarbon space is really important, especially now. Sustainability will be really important, especially as being kind of an underlay to natural gas, right? So you can think of the energy mix of the future, natural gas plus CCS or maybe nuclear, with a mix of renewables. And how can Qatar help achieve that transition, not just in natural gas, but also in working on the other accompanying kind of technologies to help meet a more sustainable future. On ICT and digital, as well, playing into the underlying trends that emerged during COVID and also moving into the future. Also, we look at other sectors, such as logistics, and basically due to Qatar's kind of strategic location between East and West, and also in the investments that has been made in infrastructure. We sit between kind of the largest deep water port in the region and also the largest air cargo fleet. So in terms of connectivity, there is an incredible value proposition there. Other areas we look at, such as advanced manufacturing and agri-tech, as well, help fit into this overall theme of resiliency. So that's, I think that's
a long list, right? And
yeah,
that's good, because you haven't taken your eye off the ball in terms of those investments. Barak, we know that Turkey has been going through a lot of volatility on the currency front. You're sitting with a very bad inflationary environment. You're sitting with a currency that's depreciating. Investors want certainty when they come over to a country in terms of FDI. And even though, because we spoke offline and you said, look, we want to focus on exports because a cheap currency means, that makes you more competitive. I want you to give me a sense of how you're selling yourself right now as Turkey to the global investor.
Actually, in our understanding, and I've been doing this job for the last 12 years, and I look at those things with a long-term perspective because investors do it like that. Of course, such challenges are not just limited for Turkey, by the way. It's valid for all emerging markets. As I said, this is a global phenomenon. The return on investment on FDI projects is declining in all emerging markets. So this is not just limited to Turkey. Instead of focusing on such short-term volatilities, FDI investors are looking at longer-term business plan. And these depreciations or inflationary pressures, it's always modeled in their calculations, when they calculate a net present value for the investment project. So we are focusing on a longer-term play, longer-term game. So as we said, 1 year ago we revised our FDI strategy, and now sustainability is our core dynamic, for example. And the second core area that we are focusing on is strengthening the supply chain in Turkey of those global multinationals. And this is not just limited for manufacturing activities of those companies. We are bringing their R&D centers to Turkey. There are more than 500 international companies having R&D centers in Turkey. So we are bringing their design offices, procurement offices. They have their regional logistic bases in Turkey. They are bringing their regional training centers. And more importantly, they are managing the regional activities from Istanbul because of the connectivity provided by the Turkish Airlines and because of the competent senior managers. So we identified more than 60 companies managing the region from Turkey. And the last important topic is the startups, those technology startups. This is a global phenomenon. This is a major driver of FDI in many emerging markets. And just as an example, in 2020 and before, the early stage investments was around triple-digit $1 million in Turkey, 100 and 200 million. Last year it was 1.6 billion US dollars, and we see the pipeline. It will be larger in this year, and it will grow in the next years. In the later stages, last year we attracted more than $3.5 billion of FDI into the later stages of those technology startups. So instead of focusing on such, these are crucial, I understand, but for positioning of the country, these are short-term discussions for us.
Okay, hopefully. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we only have about 10 minutes left, and I want to quickly check if you have questions for our panelists before I continue. Any questions from the audience? Gentleman at the back there, do we have a microphone for him, please? Please introduce yourself and your question, please, sir.
Hi, sure. Good morning.
Hi,
Peter
good morning.
Coharis from Washington, D.C. I'm an international lawyer. One of the things I wanted to point out and see if your panelists agree is the risk profile has changed profoundly in the last month regarding FDI. And some of our panelists here in subcontinent India, China, I don't think understand that the West, the United States, and Europe right now believe if you don't believe in sovereign integrity, if you don't believe in national borders, chances are you don't believe in protecting private property. Chances are you don't believe in protecting foreign direct investment. And so I just wonder in terms of your panel, and also you talked about being behind with digitization. If you don't have bilateral investment treaties with major foreign direct investors, the United States and in Europe and others, then you're also behind. And I don't want to make the legal dog wag the the legal tail wag the foreign direct investment dog. But I wonder if you can talk about the new risk perception in terms of both attracting foreign direct investment, what you're telling investors, and whether investors are looking for more legal and other protections and understanding of what's a very new world in the last month or so.
Thank you so much. I'm going to build on that. In fact, I had an interview in Dubai where we spoke to an asset manager, and he said, you know, we have to quickly take a look to see what our Russian exposure is, because we're worried about losing our US clients. So we don't know what the fallout is going to be. If we still do business with anyone in Russia, what does that mean for us? Who wants to tackle this? Yeah, Sheikh.
Yeah, I can tackle it, and I can resonate because I used to sit on the other side of this debate. I used to be leading our dispute settlement process in the World Trade Organization back in 2017 when we had these trade issues with our neighbors and also investment. So we have a famous case with BN Sport as well that went through the on-central track. And so we understand, I mean, the importance of investment protection. Qatar has over 60 BITs. Obviously, we're also one of the founding members in this WTO investment issues track that I think we're trying to advance. And it's really important. And I think businesses take all this into consideration, and they take, I think, the track record of a destination country, right? When they look at, for example, Qatar did not retaliate even when we were subject to measures back in 2017. And I think with both from gas to other different sectors to allowing in trade, even though we were boycotted on the other side. So, we understood, it's very hard to build that reputation, and it's very easy to lose it. And I think, for us, that is really important. If you look at, especially due to the current kind of geopolitical situation, and, it is a question, I think, for the West, right? Is it, a good thing that businesses are living in Russia? I mean, from that standpoint, and that, they're no longer contributing to that economy, or is it a bad thing? That is a question, I think, that still, they are looking at. And so it's more, I think, also multifaceted when you look at the current situation. And I think it's different whether it's, you're becoming a safe haven for, sanctioned entities, or whether you're becoming a destination for non-sanctioned companies that are operating in secular sectors. So that's, I think that's where we sit.
Santiago, do you want to weigh in here?
No, as I said, in terms of what I know best, which is in energy, we don't see big changes in the long term. So our view is that we'll still keep our focus on electrification, renewables, and digitalization of the system.
Fantastic. Any more questions from the audience? Want to get a sense? Okay, fantastic. Yes, I can't see. Oh, I'm so sorry. The lights are very bright. Hello, sir. Welcome.
Yeah, no problem at all. Rob Mogilnicki, I'm a senior resident scholar at the Arab Gulf States Institute in Washington and an adjunct professor at Georgetown and George Washington University in DC. What about the risks and the rewards attached to attracting more FDI from China? I'd be curious to hear from the Qatari representative, perhaps the Turkish representative as well, and then also from our colleague from Microsoft as well. Thank you.
Who would like to tackle that?
Yeah, I think, look, China is a big investor. I think for Qatar, obviously and the U.S. far surpassed that. I mean, U.S. is our single largest foreign investor with around $100 billion of FDI stock. I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. However, we see an increased interest from China, especially in the GCC region, right? Qatar as well, we cooperate with them on the Belt and Road Initiative, and we deal with them in many different respects. And there is an increased appetite, we think, in terms of investment in the region from China. How does that impact? I think, there isn't that big of an impact. I mean, obviously, things are changing really fast in this area, but we don't see that having a significant impact on flows from other destinations.
Work.
So, for my country, let me make a brief analysis. Since 2003, we attracted $240 billion of FDI, and almost 70% came from Europe. 8% is from United States, 8% is from Gulf countries, and the rest is Asia. And when we look at the Asia, it's Azerbaijan, Japan, Korea, and China. So our strategy on China, we are also a partner in the Belt and Road Initiative, and there are some investments from Chinese companies, especially in the period after the Belt and Road Initiative, and we don't categorize any risk of getting investment from China. So this is opportunity for countries, and all countries compete to win those projects. And as Sheikh Ali, my brother, said, they are becoming a major investors globally, and this is a diversification strategy for us, and because our main trading partner, business partner, is Europe and Northern America. So this is currently a diversification strategy, and we know that Chinese companies and Asian companies overall are trying to expand their markets. They would like to reach out to European markets. Since Turkey is a member of the customs union, since we have FTAs with 28 countries, it offers a perfect position as a powerhouse in the region. Because of that reason, Asian companies in general are eager to expand their businesses in Turkey, their footprint in the country.
Thank you so much. Okay, we have a few minutes left, and I want to give Lana and Santiago a chance to weigh in here. Lana.
Sure. I'm not going to weigh a lot on the investments because we actually don't have a direct relationship on investment as Microsoft, as a US company globally. However, I would say we work closely in different countries with the US Embassy and of course with the investment funds and many others on what to attract, how to attract, and how we can support. But mainly as a Microsoft company, we support every customer around the globe. And of course, one of our investments is actually a data center in China. So definitely we invest in empowering every individual and every company in the world with digital technology with no one left behind.
Fantastic. Santiago?
Well, we don't have a direct exposure to China, to be honest with you, so we don't have a view on that. Nor in Russia, by the way. But I would like to say, even if it's not exactly the question, something about the GCC and about the Gulf, since I'm here. And I would like to say is that we are seeing amazing things here and a lot of change, a big transformation in the GCC in terms of energy. There are big investments in in solar energy and transforming the sector little by little. And also, one thing that is important to say is that I'm seeing a lot of innovation that is being done here that can be applied worldwide. That's what we are doing actually here in Qatar. So I think amazing things are doing. There are big challenges in the future as well. For example, I think you need to reduce the amount of energy in the GDP, which is very high at this moment. But I think amazing things are happening in the GCC, in this transformation of the world.
Absolutely. Okay, we've run out of time, but very quickly, I'm going to give you 20 seconds each. I've got one very simple question. How are you feeling about the future? Are you worried about what's to come? Or do you think we can get through this cycle because we've built the resilience? Santiago, I'm going to start with you.
Definitely optimistic.
Optimistic.
Yes.
That's great news. Lana?
I think exciting for us as a digital company on how can we reinvent the future of every company and every country.
Fantastic. Well,
I'm optimistic as well. I believe that we see more FDI projects coming into Turkey, and we are increasing our footprint in the country and in our region as a powerhouse. So I'm quite optimistic with the FDI projects in my country.
so I'm going to do a quick follow-up, if I may. Do you think that the crisis has given you the opportunity to be able to make that a reality?
I don't see such humanitarian crisis as opportunity because its overall impact might be, negative,
Yeah.
to the region. And consider CFO or Chief Investment Officer in New York, in Tokyo, they look out as regions, not specific countries.
So you fall in
when
that.
there is no stability in the Eastern Europe, I mean, the pie will be smaller. We look for a stable environment, peaceful environment to grow that pie.
Hopefully that happens, Sheikh.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's our job to be optimistic, and the politicians' job to be more pessimistic. So
To fix the
I
problem.
would agree with all my colleagues here, and we're very optimistic. I think about the future.
That's great. So the politicians need to make things happen. They need to engage in dialogue, sort this problem out so that we can create strong economic development that is going to assist everyone on the planet. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you.